coordination comes also the challenge of trust. As you know, sometimes within a country, there is lack of coordination between agencies.
The focus is on the importance, what the maritime sector means to our region and our country.
Sometimes when people talk about capacity building in Africa, they think it in terms of technology, providing the military with proper technology and equipments. But is there like a gap analysis to identify what are the priority areas for capacity building?
We refer to it as security for a purpose, and that purpose being to develop the maritime economy.
Hello, this is Ian Kipto from the Blue Security Podcast. Before we continue, I just wanted to drop by to say a very, very much thank you for choosing us, for listening to this podcast to create awareness about, our maritime issues, maritime security, the blue economy, not only in Africa, but the world. On our next episode, we sit down with Kiruja Micheni, Project Manager, Djibouti Code of Conduct and the JA Amendment. Fantastic gentleman, very cool, very calm. Kindly do enjoy the podcast and feel free to share any comments that you may have. Share it as wide as you can. This would mean that you can reach more people, more audience, and more importantly, attract even more guests onto the podcast.
You're listening to Blue Radio, bringing the vibe.
I would like to start off by a simple, understanding of, what is the DCOC? Because for myself, I'm hearing it for the first time. Could you break it down for us?
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure. Now, the Djibouti Code of Conduct of the DCOC, I would say is first and foremost an agreement between states. A commitment to cooperate to the fullest possible extent in the suppression of illegal activities at sea. Now, this was signed in 2009. You recall from around 2005, when this region was really in big trouble because of the Somali-based piracy. And at that time, piracy was a very new crime in the region. The countries did not have the mechanisms. It was all a very new phenomenon. So IMO, working with the member states, established the DCOC as a way to build regional capacity to deal with the menace of piracy. So it was signed in Djibouti in January 2009.
Now, since this is like a collaboration between states, and different states have different capacities, in taking care of their own waters, how does, the DCOC bring these particular parties together to ensure that, if Kenya does not have the capacity, how does Kenya contact, let's say someone in like Djibouti to help them out? How does that occur?
Okay, let me explain. Okay, we've got the 20 signatory states.
Okay.
So starting off from Egypt all the way to South Africa, including the Indian Ocean Islands as far east as the Maldives, as well as the Gulf of Aden countries, so Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen, etc. So it's really quite a large area. And of course, that represents how wide piracy was at the point. Now, the way they work is the IMO, and actually my team provides the secretariat, so we do the coordination role. But really, all we do is support efforts of government. Most of it, and I like to look at the Djibouti Code of Conduct, and actually we'll talk later about the JA Amendment, as a framework of cooperation. So we have lots of international partners that work with us. So all we do is really coordinating in building that capacity and trying to bring about regional solutions for regional solutions. So regional solutions for regional problems.
You've mentioned that, the conduct tries to bring countries in, let's say, South Africa, Egypt, and that particular region. I'd like to draw your attention to what's happening at the Red Sea. How does the Djibouti conduct, fit into this particular scope and try to rally support for, these particular regions? And more importantly, we are seeing a lot of quote unquote Western powers, sending, effort, sending military into this region. But you're not seeing any African, countries sending troops, sending their navy in those particular regions.
Well, I'm very pleased that you've raised the issue of regional participation in dealing with the crisis we see in the Red Sea. And yes, you're right. You don't have, say, African navies contributing to the regional efforts of protecting ships. However, regional states are doing quite a lot here because you must understand that the intervention by international naval forces cannot completely deal with the problem. It's more like dealing with the symptoms, but it's not going to provide a sustainable long-term solution. So that solution is usually basically must be based on dealing with addressing the root causes. And that's what the JEDA Amendment, Djibouti Code of Conduct, and the JEDA Amendment is doing, trying to build regional capacity. And there's already some actions that the Djibouti Code of Conduct has taken to address this. I don't know whether you want me to talk about those now, or do you want me to?
Kindly, right now would be good.
Yes. First of all, obviously the problem in the Red Sea has a major impact in the region. Obviously, it affects the region's economies, and it's a concern for all of us. And secondly, of course, is the impact it has on seafarers, because seafarers' lives are on the line. And then, the environmental problems, obviously, the challenges that we could face. Right now we're having the crisis of one of the vessels that was hit, and it's virtually sinking.
Yes.
They've had of
The British vessel, yeah.
the Ruby Mai, yes. So that's a major concern for the regional states. And one of the things that the regional states did the moment this problem began to escalate, the DCOC rallied all the member states, and they came up with a very strong statement. And one of the statements was calling for a UN Security Council resolution, actually trying to push for that, so that we can have a coordinated effort in dealing with that problem. Now, going more towards what the region has done, they've also had several meetings including with the IMO Secretary General, and come up with an 8-point sort of like a plan of what the region could actually do in addressing the root causes. Some of them could be things like on information sharing. They're working on building the regional information sharing network as one of them. The building regional capacities and capabilities to be able to address the problems of insecurity at sea. And also implementing some of the provisions, the IMO provisions, like what we call the ISPS code, which deals with the security in ports, so that we can, because you must understand that when it comes to even like smuggling of weapons, you find weapons being smuggled through ports, through ships. And these are the ones will end up with the perpetrators of some of the insecurity. Yeah. So the solution really must also be on land, and that's why the DCOC is working now, trying to build member states' capacities to be able to deal with those problems. Okay.
All right, interesting. I'd like to draw your attention to a development that's happening between Somalia and Ethiopia about security. In their waters. I believe this is a jurisdiction that, the DCOC has in that particular region, because, it affects member states in that particular region. How does, the DCOC, come to provide, maybe I would say a mediation sort of role to ensure that, there is safety in these particular waters, and trade and life, is preserved in that particular area?
Now, on that one, it's really not a role for the DCOC. We don't go into the political side of things. But what I must say is that both Somalia and Ethiopia signatories to the Djibouti Code of Conduct and its JA amendment. And we continue to work very well together in terms of coordination, because most of the efforts are actually technical assistance. So it's not, we leave that to the to the relevant stakeholders who are supposed to deal with the political side. Yes.
You live, okay. That's interesting. Pascaline, I'd like to welcome you. I know you definitely have a question before I move on to Brian.
Thanks, Mitch. I've seen a communication from Yemen, because it's one of your member states. And I wanted to know how, as DCOC, you're working with Yemen, because they sort of provide a local solution to what you're seeing in the Red Sea. Are there some interventions or responses maybe you've had with Yemen concerning that particular issue? And what is it like?
Okay, before this crisis escalated, we were already working with Yemen. There are actually two interventions. One of them is the IMO is one of the implementing partners for a EU-funded Red Sea project, which is supporting regional states to build capacity to enhance their maritime security. And we've been working on that, basically developing the right frameworks, as well as support to strengthen port security. And the other point was, Yemen is a key part of the information sharing network for the DCOC, and they used to have a very, very effective center in Sana'a. But then, because after Sana'a was overrun by rebels, the Yemen requested that this be relocated to Aden, and we were in the process of actually a lot of work has been done in reestablishing this center called RIMISC in Aden. And the Yemenis are actually really are really ready to continue supporting from that center, and we're looking to building more capacity to make sure that the center is operationalized. Now, the other one, and I think this is actually contained in the 8-point plan that I mentioned, that has been brought up by the DCOC steering committee, is the need to build capabilities of the Yemeni Coast Guard to be able to take action locally. I think that is really, really important. And through the request, the chair of the DCOC steering committee has reached out to the IMO Secretary General, and I know that consideration is now being made to look out for partners to actually support this in terms of building the capacity of the Yemeni Coast Guard. I think it's important that the capacities are built on land. As I mentioned earlier, the support for the Yemeni Coast Guard is very critical. And here I must actually draw some parallels and with the fight against piracy. Because you remember that piracy was able to continue for a long time because pirate groups found safe havens within Somalia, and the business model was working that way.
Yeah.
But through a lot of work and building the capacities of the Somali law enforcement forces, we've seen that it has become more and more difficult for pirates to hijack ships and keep them in Somalia. And we really commend the efforts that we've seen from the Somali Coast Guard being able to take action and actually take action against pirates and even release pirates, people that have been hijacked, which is really commendable. We've also seen even recently with the current what appears to be a little bit of a resurgence of some elements of piracy, taking advantage of the insecurity in the Red Sea. We've seen Seychelles take action against a pirate group, and they managed to rescue people that had been crews that have been hijacked. That is very, very commendable. And I think that's why we're saying we must focus very much on building regional capacities to have a sustainable solution. Yes.
All right, Pascaline.
Yes, I've got two questions. Yes, DCOC is one of the first mechanisms to have been established to improve cooperation between regional states in the maritime domain, supported by the international community. What is your assessment of this path? And my other question will be, all member states of the DCOC and JA amendment, they are not at the same level in terms of securing their waters, in terms of capabilities. How the mechanism bridges this gap?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would want to say that the DCOC is a success story. As you know, and actually for us to really give a fair assessment, we must look at what the DCOC is. As I said before, these are commitment by sovereign states to take action at national and regional level. If you look at some of the key successes, I would want to start with, first of all, the breakdown of barriers of communication through the network of national focal points, such that today all the member states work very, very closely together with direct contacts with the focal points, and also with the fact that there's a secretariat that works with all those countries. So it's a web that really functions well. The next one is on the information sharing, and I think that goes hand in hand with what I said about breaking down barriers of communications. So we've got coordinated, very smooth and effective communications between states, and even being able to share information that previously wasn't possible. If you look at the regional training program, since the code was signed, to date, we've ran a very successful training program that brings in different partners to provide. And we're now close to 2,000 students have gone through our training programs. And I think for me, it's not so much about it's not just about the skills learned, but it's also the network of practitioners that by bringing people together from different countries, such that today, if you come from Mauritius, coming to Kenya, if you come from say Mauritian Coast Guard, coming to Kenya Navy, for example, they'll find people they work together, and basically it spreads across the whole region. So much so that if there was any operation that required coordination, they know each other, and therefore makes it very easy to work. Then, for a long time, this region has usually been described as almost synonymous with, say, blindness. And a lot of effort has been done now in enhancing maritime domain awareness. And therefore, should I say, steps have been made in addressing this. And of course, there's a lot more needs to be done. And we're working towards that with other partners to see that this happens. So, but I think most importantly now is the awareness, because if you look at, for example, especially most of Africa, that this region doesn't have a long tradition of seafaring, and therefore you find that the political leadership tends to be rather land-centric. But I think as time has gone on, there's now greater awareness on the need to develop the maritime sector. There's a lot of focus on the blue economy, which is fantastic, and actually, which is really, I think it's a big deal, because and you must ask yourself, why is it a big deal? You see, if you look at the population of Africa, for example, projected to double by 2050. Mm-hmm. Now, which means that Africa must find jobs for all those people. Otherwise, we'll have a serious crisis. Now, where are those jobs going to come from? I'll put it to you that it is the maritime sector that has the potential, because it's not developed. There's huge potential out there, but we need to tap it. So we've moved now from what we call what was being described as sea blindness to now addressing what is called maritime wealth blindness. But I see now, that is now, the region is coming out of that. And I think there is I see a lot of enthusiasm to get things done, which is and it encourages us a lot. I would also want to say that many of the regional states have reviewed their laws to prosecute pirates, and this has happened a lot in Kenya, Mauritius, Seychelles. This is most commendable. And then I already mentioned about the efforts that the regions have taken in, especially when it comes to interdiction operations. Now, going to your second question, Pascaline, about the countries that are not as well resourced as that probably need a lot more assistance. Now, if you look at what the main problem is that generally bilateral assistance from donors is usually driven by the donor priorities, and therefore you find that some of the countries that may not be that strategically important to the donor may be left out. And we see that happening. We see there's some countries getting get more share of assistance than others. But what we've done, I think, from the DCOC perspective, there are two ways of addressing this. One is the IMO has what is called the Technical Cooperation Program that tends to prioritize the least developed countries. That's number one. And then number two, the DCOC has a multi-donor trust fund, which is managed by the IMO. So by having this pot of money in one kitty, then we're able to target those countries that are not being could be left out, and therefore ensuring that no one is left behind. I hope that answers you, Pascaline.
All right. For me, I would like to understand. Yesterday we touched on something about communication, and you've touched about communication. Maybe there are vessels who are using, or rather are in African waters. Sometimes you are within, let's say, Kenyan waters, and the military or the navy approach you. Maybe they want to understand what you're doing and this sort of thing. But some vessels are not ready to be onboarded, and sometimes would give false calls of maybe we have pirates on our tail, we have this kind of thing happening. How does the DCOC come through and ensure that this chain of communication is smooth, that if Ian says I have pirates on my tail, it's actually true that that is actually happening?
Thank you for bringing that question. I think it's important that we understand the importance of information sharing when it comes to dealing with insecurity at sea. Now, and the next thing I would like to mention is that no one country can do it alone because of the internet, the way we are interconnected. Yeah. It requires that all the countries really work together. So what the DCOC is doing on this is, I mentioned about the information sharing network. Yeah. And within this network, you have each country establishes a multi-agency national maritime information sharing center. So you have one in Kenya, we've got Tanzania, Madagascar, Seychelles, Mauritius, everywhere. As far as Yemen and all that. So we've got these networks centers all linked together. And then we've got two centers. We've got one in Seychelles, which is a operations coordination center. And there is another one, that's now a regional center. And then another regional center called which is the fusion center now for information fusion in Madagascar. We've also got the actions of international naval forces operating in this region. There are many, EUNAVFOR there. You've got combined maritime forces. You've got Indian Navy is there. Lots of independent deployers as well. So all these navies are working towards a common aim, basically to keep our sea lanes of communications safe. Now, without coordination, it becomes a problem. And one of the reasons why there's so much focus on the information sharing, because you find that sometimes when international naval forces, when they come across, for example, illegal activities, so for example, whether it's a piracy issue, whether it's drug trafficking or weapons trafficking, in general, what they've been doing is they would destroy the contraband and let the offenders, let the vessel go and release the suspects, which of course that does not really address the problem, because once you know that that's all that will happen, you just lose it. Just go and you go and do it another day.
Yeah.
So obviously that's frustrating to the international navies. It's frustrating to the regional countries. So the idea now is to have a mechanism where, for example, information on illegal activities can be shared to any of those national centers, and then those centers can either carry out an interdiction operation to go and intervene, or they could ask one of the partners to actually to intervene on behalf. So that's one of the things that that's happening. We're trying to build on, and I think once that one is in place, I think it'll be a big game changer. I also think that a lot more, of course, will need to be done. Having the right MOUs, but luckily the JA amendment in particular, it contains the measures contained in that agreement. Actually, it opens lots of options, lots of opportunities that countries can use to deal with all those challenges that you see. Yeah.
All right, interesting. I would like to switch into something more closer to home. Africa depends a lot, on foreign grain like wheat, soybeans, and this kind of thing, from outside Africa. For example, we saw the Black Sea Grain Initiative delivering, grain to countries like Mali, Central African Republic, and these kind of places. But now with with whatever is happening in the Red Sea, these chains are affected. Delivery of food systems are affected. Djibouti, one of the countries that benefits heavily from wheat, actually right now is being affected, and we are seeing the situation in the Red Sea. We cannot predict that it could end tomorrow or next week. How does the DCOC come into play to ensure that it could sort of find a solution to the whole matter, to try and bring harmony in the particular affected region?
Unfortunately, you're right that this problem might be with us for a long time. And addressing the crisis requires a multifaceted approach, as I mentioned before. First of all, to address the immediate security concerns, so that of what you're talking about can, the interruptions in trade can be addressed. But of course, addressing the root causes that I mentioned. So I think here it's quite a complex problem, to be honest with you, because there are also other political solutions to be dealt with and as well. And to really get the whole issue resolved requires a lot of parties on the table. Would like maybe having more of the international communities working more closely with the regional state to come up with that regional solution. But I think, as I mentioned, that there's no magic bullet to this. And regional states must work, must step up the efforts to build capacities, their own capacities, so that they can address those problems that we already mentioned. So that we can minimize and be able to take action at sea. And the other thing is, you must also look at the concerns that the region has. For example, if you look at what we refer to as IUU fishing, whereby it actually always comes up as the biggest priority, the biggest concern for the region, because then the region knows that they lose a lot of stocks, and there's a lot of revenue that is lost as because of illegal fishing. And I mentioned earlier about the potential, and the reason why countries really need to work to develop their maritime economies. Now, one of the things that the countries should do and are doing through especially the JA amendment, is trying to create that environment that will allow for that development to happen. So if you look at I didn't talk much about the JA amendment and the difference between the Djibouti Code of Conduct, where the JA amendment comes in. But with the JA amendment, it's not just about dealing with maritime security threats. It is also about economic development. So we refer to it as security for a purpose, and that purpose being to develop the maritime economy. And I think there is now more awareness of the need to invest more in maritime security, investing in the navies, the coast guards, and all that. But more importantly, also the coordination that is required at national level, because unfortunately, some of the problems we've had in the past, and it still persists, will be sometimes silo mentality. Silos, operating in silos at national level. And as you know, the maritime sector, nobody has a monopoly of the maritime sector.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but then if they're not talking to each other, you can't really have effective maritime security if you're not coordinated. And we realize actually big lessons learned in the implementation of the Djibouti Code of Conduct, because initially there was a lot of focus on regional cooperation. And then, so all the efforts was on regional cooperation. And then the weakness was the action at national level became a problem because there was less coordination. So now the emphasis of the DCOC-JA amendment, which is actually contained in Article 3. Article 3 is supposed to fix all those problems, is now building national capabilities and getting the countries to work more closely and coordinated. For example, if you take an example of any country in the region, you find that sometimes the Navy may be having their own resources, their surveillance systems, the Maritime Administration has got their own, the fisheries have got their different systems, port authorities have got, but they're not connected.
Yeah.
But then they all come from the taxpayers, don't they? But it wouldn't really make a big difference if they sat together and and all the investments are made in such a way that they contribute to one, and really that's what we are trying to work on and encouraging. And I think the structures have already been put in place to address those, including developing the right strategies at country in each of the countries, and establishing the frameworks for coordination. Each of the countries having a national maritime security coordination committees. And I think that will really make a difference when we start, when we get all those working together. Yeah.
All right, interesting. Before I welcome Pascaline and Brian, we understand the African Union is going to be electing, I believe, their Secretary General and this kind of thing. And we cannot underplay the role, that the continent has to offer, especially, more than 35 countries depending on, the blue economy. And one of their goals for, I believe, 2050 or thereabout is, Africa's economy being uplifted and dependent on, the blue economy. In an advisory capacity, how would, the DCOC advise the African Union to position themselves, so that in future they can be first and foremost maritime secure, having resources, having, these particular resources to ensure that, each country or most of the countries have, enough security intelligence and that kind of thing. And more importantly, secure themselves to, or rather position themselves, have resources to tap into, let's say, fishing and this kind of thing.
Thank you for that. African Union, as you said, is actually really important in rallying efforts of member states in developing the maritime economies, as well as dealing with maritime security. And African Union has already come up with some important frameworks like the AIM 2050, which is quite good. But African Union can and should do more, because there's a lot of expectations in terms of what African Union can do, and especially if you take, for example, the case of the Red Sea. There's expectation that African Union should be should be at the forefront in dealing with the problems. The problem that are there, but we're not really hearing very much coming out of African Union on that. But having said that, there's a lot of efforts done by the regional frameworks, and again, if you look at the Djibouti Code of Conduct JA amendment, and which covers the Western Indian Ocean side, if you go now to the western part of Africa, Western Central Africa, you've got the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, which is very similar to the DCOC, which means that most of the African littoral states have already signed up to and agreed to cooperate to the fullest possible extent in dealing with all those problems. So Africa has a very good starting point. So even if there was to be an Africa-wide maritime security cooperation framework, that has already been more or less established, because it's really getting the two together and moving on. But there are, of course, and the reason why I said it must be all hands on deck when dealing with this. So African Union doing the right thing it should be doing. The regional states also doing the same under the different frameworks. Because as I mentioned before, you asked me the question about the political part of it.
Yes.
So those solutions can be provided through African Union. And of course, when it comes to the capacity building, those are the technical sort of cooperation can be dealt with at the regional level. But the other important point, obviously, is the need to coordinate between those different the many different frameworks and also programs as well, so that there's avoidance of duplications, all working towards one common goal and one common aim. And I think that is where that's why we can work closely with the African Union in dealing with it.
All right, thank you very much. Brian, I don't know if you can welcome.
So Mitch, sometimes when people talk about capacity building in Africa, they think it in terms of technology, providing the military with proper technology and equipments. But is there like a gap analysis to identify what are the priority areas for capacity building? Because capacity building is also in terms of infrastructure, maybe surveillance. Human resources is also very important, especially developing the human resources to be able to guide that technology. how do you could you elaborate more on that? How do you identify? Do you have like a gap analysis to know what is the exact capacity building that is needed in the region to be able to, fight some of the challenges you are seeing with maritime security?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I think here you must look at both capacities and capabilities building. And in this, the DCOC has actually been working very closely, very much on in addressing the challenges that we have with capacity building to make sure that it is tailored to the needs of the region. So we've got a working group which represents all the member states. And on the DCOC website, there's a matrix actually that's been developed, a capacity building coordination matrix, where member states identify their capacity building needs and their priorities, and they are listed on that platform. The idea is, and what we wanted to address by doing this was, we realized that sometimes some of the assistance that was provided did not necessarily align with the regional needs and priorities. So the idea was that make this available. And then there are forums, like we've got the Friends of the DCOC, who are those international partners, that from time to time we have meetings with them, coordination meetings, whereby the needs and priorities of those countries are tabled. And the partners can then try and align their assistance as much as possible with the needs of the region. Secondly, there's as I said, there's a working group. There's a dedicated working group, with all the member states represented. It's called Working Group 2, which is a working group on capacity building coordination. And this is the one that is tasked with coordinating their effort and making sure that the benefits accrue to their region, and that the assistance that they receive is relevant to them and addresses their key needs. I think that's the main. I think for me that's an important development in making sure that you've got all this.
All right, Pascaline.
Yes, I just want to come back to the conversation on coordination and cooperation. When it comes to cooperation and coordination, comes also the challenge of trust. As you know, sometimes within a country there is lack of coordination between agencies. My question is, how do DCOC overcome that issue of trust and encourage sharing of information between different countries, and how DCOC is working towards enhancing coordination with other regional mechanisms?
Pascaline, that's an excellent question, and the elephant in the room. As I said, we've come a long way. We talked about the silo mentality. And the way part of it is being addressed. The problem, I think, has been the need to build that national capacities and creating awareness for regional states to understand the reason why they should work together. One way that has been very effective, IMO introduced these tabletop exercises, whereby you'd bring in all the key, actually a very senior level stakeholders, and in one room, and you create scenario like emergency scenarios, and you get them to discuss how they're going to deal with it. Those exercises are actually designed to try and for people to understand the roles and who plays which role and why they cannot do it on their own. And that has been very effective because the exercises themselves are very interesting and they get very heated. They get to a point almost sometimes some of the participants even want to fight. You know, it goes to that extent, but it's really fun, and we've learned a lot of lessons, as I mentioned from the Djibouti Code of Conduct, because before for example, a message would come from one country or from the international partners about an incident, but then you find that the response is very slow. Because sometimes you could have a national focal point who that matter really doesn't really affect him, or it's not in his area of work, and therefore the communication is broken, and therefore action is delayed in being taken. So that's why I said that the JA amendment was tailored specifically under Article 3 to address the issue of coordination and trust building. So one of these, and I think with the countries that have made progress so far, because this is work that is ongoing, is what I mentioned about developing the National Maritime Security Committees. Now, IMO introduced what we call the IMO model on the whole of government approach. So the whole of government is really, really important, and I mean that in the whole sense, the whole of government approach to maritime security. And this program has 3 pillars, although sometimes I put a 4th pillar, and I'll explain why. The first one is you establish this multi-agency National Maritime Security Committee. Now this has got everybody, and they are senior people, and they are also subcommittees. Now, these are now the drivers of action to deal with maritime security, so that you no longer deal with it with silos. The next thing, the committee also has subcommittees. For example, you can have a subcommittee on maritime domain awareness that focuses on maybe putting the resources together and developing maritime situation awareness for your country. Now, the next thing you do is developing a maritime security risk register. Now, the risk register is you put all those stakeholders together, and from them you try and capture what keeps you awake at night kind of problems. What is your biggest worry if it happened? Can you imagine a country, for example, Kenya is trying to attract cruise tourism. Yes. If there was an attack on a cruise ship, can you imagine the impact it will have on the country? Or if maybe there was a terror attack on a ship in the port of Mombasa, for example, or in Seychelles or in any other country. So you put those, and they are all weighted. So you've got the most critical, the red areas. So you've got this, which is a living document. And once you develop that, the next thing, then you come up with a national maritime security strategy. Now, the strategy, of course, will address all those issues. I talked about a 4th pillar, and I was trying to introduce the idea of this multi-agency National Maritime Information Sharing Center, because this is why you've got now these people on, sitting in one building, looking at the same screen and trying to come up with an integrated maritime awareness picture for the country. Yeah.
All right. I can see time. We are almost out of time. This is for my team, Brian and Pascaline. I would like you to kindly prepare your final questions. I'd like us to be on time today. For me, my final question is the 3 strategies or 3 points when you're developing strategy: knowing yourself, knowing your opponent, and knowing your terrain. I believe you've done extensive research when it comes to maritime security in Africa, the threats, the dangers, but there are some gaps that still exist. How is the DCOC working to ensure that some of these gaps are these gap areas are addressed, and we can achieve, let's say by 2030, 2040, we can have powerful maritime in Africa?
I think the biggest problem, I think, would be the coordination of effort that's needed so that you can optimize the resources you have to be able to take action, and so that you can be effective in what in what you're doing. Because sometimes if you've got a big problem and you're addressing maybe just the symptoms instead of having a long-term strategy for it, then of course you may not be effective. And that's why I said that the work already being done in terms of ensuring that there's effective coordination of effort at national level, and which is backed by a robust strategy that will go far, and especially making sure that the resources are effectively utilized to meet the necessary, to deal with the problem. The other bit is sometimes we don't leverage the support that's available effectively, because as I said, maritime crimes and is not just a problem for just one country. Countries need to work together, and that's why you see a lot of international partners are in the region. For example, imagine a country like Denmark as an example. They've got their shipping line, Maersk. I think one time you go to the ports in the region, you see a Maersk ship there. It is in their interest that when their ship come to this region, when they get into the port, those ships are safe. And that's why they invest money. They invest money to secure their ships. When piracy came up here, we saw very quickly, so many naval partners coming in, international partners coming to deal with the problem, because it's a global problem. Now we're seeing the Red Sea, the same thing again. International partners are coming up and trying to deal with this problem. Now and then we've got existing frameworks that bring together the efforts of those partners. For example, we've got the EU now for the EU. We've got the combined maritime forces that are based in Bahrain, and of course we've got the regional countries as well. But I think the coordination of effort sometimes is lacking, because if we build trust and cooperation with those partners, we could very well leverage on the support that they could provide. I'll give you an example. The EU came up with under the MASI program. There's a program on operations coordination at sea, using the center in Seychelles to coordinate operations and regional partners. Pascaline has a lot more information on that more than I do. But with the participating states, of course, the committed assets, naval assets. And what would happen is that information is passed on regarding illegal activity happening at sea. And those countries would then utilize those assets to go and interdict the whatever is
happening out at sea.
Yeah, exactly. And that has been very effective. We've seen success stories from those countries on actions that have been taken and come up with a very good result. Now the DCOC appreciates this, and I think it's been a very good learning curve for us. I think it's been a very good case study. And at the last high-level meeting of the DCOC, which was in Cape Town in October, the region agreed and recommended to extend this program so that you get more countries involved. Now, the idea here is, because we've got the network of information sharing, so we're able to pass information from one country to the other regarding illegal activity. Say, if you take Tanzania, for example, information is passed to their center in Dar es Salaam that is suspicious or illegal activity happening at this point in their waters. Now, if Tanzania, for a reason or the other, is not able to take action, then there is no reason why, with the kind of framework we are trying to work on, they could not request Kenya to intervene on their behalf and hand over the suspects to the Tanzanian authority to take forward. The same thing with international partners. If you have, for example, a EU NAVFOR vessel nearby, then you could ask them to please do it, take action on our behalf, and then hand over, So, but this is work that a lot of work needs to be done here, because the legal frameworks need to be put in terms of MOUs to allow for this to happen. But I think this is a step in the right direction, and I think a very good commitment that I hope will be it will be implemented as in the spirit that it was agreed upon in Cape Town.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian and Pascaline. Your final questions?
The people right now who are on the front lines of the Red Sea crisis is the seafarers. I know you had talked about the seafarers a bit. Are there specific initiatives by DCOC or your members designed specifically to handle the seafarer safety? Because sometimes when they get hit, they're the ones who are suffering.
Not specific, but I think if you look at the Rubima, for example, Djibouti took action to safeguard the safety of the crews, and I think the only one that I would say it could be the fact that there is dialogue, the fact that countries are speaking about it. In fact, even almost on daily basis, we're seeing communication between especially the steering committee members wondering what can we do, what can we do about it. The fact that we've got those networks, it's important that it's very easy to reach out to any of the frontline countries and those that are maybe in a position to assist, to be able to assist. So the great thing is, while we're on the table together and discussing this as a regional problem, it has brought it makes it possible for region to consider the problem and be able to take action or request assistance where the region is not able to provide. And I think for me this is important, because I started by mentioning one of the success stories of the DCOC has been breaking down those barriers of communication, and I think we are ahead on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Pascaline, your final question, kindly.
Yes, my final question. As you know, maritime security... Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying that maritime security remains a complex issue and is more considered as a political and naval subject. Yet maritime security is everyone's business. So the wider population, the youth, they are rarely interested in maritime security, and even some media are not well versed on the subject. So you mentioned the opportunities that the ocean offers, etc. How DCOC is planning or is working towards sensitizing the population and the media on maritime security?
I'm glad I've got Esther here, because I think if you've been following the DCOC, especially in the last year, there is a lot of media efforts on media, because that's an area that we were very weak. Not many people understood what the DCOC does. Our visibility was actually very low. And I think we've reached a point where now there's a lot to build on, and I'm glad that the team is doing a great job on the media side. I think if you look at the website, there's a lot of information that's coming up. A lot is being shared with even on platforms like WhatsApp. I think on daily basis I see Esther posting so much of what's happening, and even the national focal points also sharing the same thing. However, that is not enough. because and I'm very glad for this opportunity like this, because you target the youth, and I don't think many of our youth actually, unless you're in the sector, not many really understand this, and I think it's really an area that we must advocate for in creating a lot more awareness, whether through seminars, even our training. If you look at most of the trainings are usually, of course, we work with administrations, the Coast Guards, etc. But of course, even schools, creating awareness in schools is important. So I think it's an area that we'll need to focus on more. Yes, you've reminded us of some action that we must do a lot more, and I'm glad that we are some good work is already happening, and we hope to build on that.
All right. Thank you very much. In terms of visibility and media stuff, that's why Blue Radio is coming up, and we would love to be partners to try and bridge this information gap. From my team and myself, thank you very much for making the time. Thank you very much for your questions, for being patient with us. More importantly, from the team from DCOC, thank you very much for being so patient with us. I hope you've learned something, and I hope we can collaborate more and more in the future. One final minute to you, Mitch in studio. What final message would you like to leave, any young person, more importantly, would listen to the podcast, and a general message to everyone, in the maritime space?
Yes, thank you very much. I think really the focus is on the importance, what the maritime sector means to our region and our country. I mentioned about the enormous potential, and that's there. That's untapped. And as we struggle with the problems of a lot of youth unemployment, I think to address this problem, we must look at where there is potential solutions, and that's investing in this sector and getting the education. I think to the youth, this is an opportunity that you need to take in terms of course, the courses that you do, because we need the maritime experts. It's an area that we don't have many maritime experts, and there are opportunities out there. Look out, talk to your maritime administrations to see where those opportunities are. And don't forget, there are also opportunities for global jobs in seafaring and including in the cruise industries. So you cannot afford to ignore this sector. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. From our guys on the internet space, this is where we get to say goodbye till we meet again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and bye.
All right.